All right, good afternoon. We're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Jesus Morales. I'm an Instructional Technology Specialist in the Digital and Learning Resources Department. Welcome to our very first It's a Tech Tip webinar for the 2025-2026 school year. Today we have Mr. Herman Seufert, and he will be talking to us about Classwize and how you can use Classwize to help get your class stay focused on what you need them to be doing in class, learning, creating, collaborating, all that great stuff. So I'm going to let Herman take it away.
Hello, everybody. So first, microphone check. Everybody can hear me. Things turned on. The best way for this to work is if you follow along as I'm sharing. And so the place you're going to want to start is in your EPISD Plaza or class link. And so if you want to go ahead and open a tab and go to your EPISD Plaza class link and sign in with your district information, that way you can kind of click along and follow along with some of what I'm saying. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so you can see what I'm doing. So when you're here, you can kind of scroll through. I probably have more applications than you do, but you can simply just search at the top for Classwize, and it'll pop up. Once you click on Classwize, it should automatically open a new tab for you, sign you in with your district information, and once it opens and populates everything, you should see all of the classes and courses that are assigned to you through frontline teams. And so just like Schoology gets data fed to it from frontline teams, so all the students that are rostered to your different periods automatically populate in your Schoology courses, same thing should be happening here with Classwize. All of those students that are in that class at the end of the day, it should communicate with Classwize and they should show up in your class the following day. And so it should be constantly updated, and so that it should make it easier for you. But that's why it's important to go to your Plaza class link, because it's going to ensure that you're signing in the right way and you're getting access to the right information. Okay. So once you sign in, you should be at your My Classes page, your home, if you will, where all your classes are listed. This part here could be different based on the level that you teach. So if you teach elementary, you're going to have all your different sections or periods there, but you might only end up using your homeroom or attendance class because you're going to have the same kids throughout the day. Whereas if you teach secondary, you might have a different group of kids throughout the different 7 periods that you have throughout the day. And so it's going to look a little different and you might use it a little different, but each class and the way that Classwize works is going to be the same. Let's just talk a little bit here about the periods that you have showing up. Hopefully you see all of those. If you don't, then you'll want to make a Zendesk ticket right away to let IT know that for some reason your courses aren't populating. But there are some things you can do right from here. For each class, there's 3 little options down at the bottom. The first one is to modify students. And so within that class, you can click that, open that up, and add students. All you would need is the username of the student, and then you could add them to that class. This shouldn't be something you need to do because those students that are in that class should auto-populate there from frontline teams. But there might be a day where there's no sub for the other teacher down the hall, and so they give you half the class, and so you have this group of students that aren't normally there. And so you could go into modify and add those students. And because those student populations are corrected overnight, it should automatically remove them before the next day. And so that you would do there for modify students. You could also remove students after you've added them after that period's over. Next to that is a place to go to rename, which could be really important because the names giving to some of these classes might not make sense. Just the way your names in Schoology, like the course names can be a little confusing. So if you click on that second little symbol, it's like the square with the pencil sticking out of it, you can come in and actually change the name of that whole class and name it whatever makes sense to you. And so I encourage you to do that. Right? Depending on what you teach, what level you're teaching, you have the option to change the name of that course or that class so that it makes sense to you and it's easier for you to use Classwize. There's also an option down here for you to pin the class. And that can be extremely useful for elementary teachers because you might only be using one class over and over throughout the day, but that one class you can now pin. And so I can select this and that'll pin that class to the top. And so that's the one that's always at the top for easy access. Any changes that you make, you're going to want to make sure you hit save. Okay. Also, there's a pin symbol on each of these classes, and that's another way that you can pin without having to change names and stuff like that. So if I wanted this class, this is the one I'm going to be using all the time. If I hit that pin, it's going to pin it to the top, then all the other classes are filtered below that. And so even if you just needed to pin a couple different classes, you can do that and it moves them to the front. So you can do that directly by clicking on the pin, but you also will find that pin within the renaming class option. The third one here is for classroom settings. So under classroom settings, you have the ability to add a co-teacher. So if there's another teacher that comes into that particular period or class time and they work with you and they're a co-teacher, then it's a good idea to add them as a teacher to that class, because that means if you're not there or if you need some assistance, that teacher can then turn on the class and implement all the rules and features that come with Classwize, and they can end it for you as well. And so if you have a co-teacher helping you, it's a good idea to go ahead and add them as a co-teacher in Classwize. The same way you might do within your Schoology, right? So if there's other teachers that help you run your Schoology platform, then you can do the same thing here in Classwize. So the same way you need the username to add the student, you just need the username of the teacher. You type it in and then you can add them. And then you want to hit save. There's also scheduling. That's a new feature that we have access to. It's probably most useful for elementary and maybe middle. I think for high school teachers, because of the A and B day and the way that changes all the time, it could be a little bit harder to set schedules because it's going to change week to week. But for everyone else, this might be something you want to take advantage of because you can create a schedule for every day and set a particular start and end time, or even multiple times in one day, right? So I could have 3 start and end times for my Monday class time, depending on when I want Classwize to automatically start and then automatically end. If you don't use this scheduling system, you can still do it manually by clicking start and clicking end. But if you feel like that's something you might forget to do, or you just, you know, you don't want to have to click and end every time you do it, then scheduling might be something you want to explore because you can have that set up and it'll just happen automatically for you. Just make sure whatever changes you make there, you hit save before you close that window. So we talked about modifying your students, changing the name, using that pin feature to help sort your classes, and then being able to add a co-teacher, and then even set up scheduling to help you start and end your classes. And so we've done all this just from our My Classes home screen where we see everything that comes from frontline teams. Any questions about that before we talk about a few other things here? I'm going to talk about a few things up here in the top now. Over in the blue margin on the top right, there's a little graduation cap and it says Academy. It's actually a really nice resource that they've just added recently where you can take different courses and watch videos on how to do different tools and use them and kind of upgrade your Classwize use. And so it's a great place to go to get some information and get some help if you're looking for it. There's also a help center where you can search for different resources. Our department's also built a course to kind of help you through that, and you're always encouraged to contact your ITS with your questions. But if you want something instant and be able to learn at your own pace when you want, that Academy is a nice little feature that they've added this year. Underneath that, you do have the ability to create your own class. So if you have like a polling class during win time or something that's different than your normal assigned rostered class times, you can create a class for that. And you would add those students the same way or send them a code. You would just click that, give it a name. You can pin that one if you want to pin that. And then there's the ability to give a invitation code so that those students can join. You can also combine classes. So if you wanted to combine them, just be careful with that because you want to make sure that they have the same students in both those classes. Otherwise, that could create a lot of issues. But really, the one thing I wanted to talk about from this screen outside of the editing things that you can do with your individual classes is this focus library. So the focus library allows you to create a digital environment to focus the students on what you want them to be doing, right? Like in your physical classroom, you would have students, okay, close your laptop and, take out this and open to this page and, whatever you want them to do to focus them on the tasks you want them to be working on in that moment. Well, the focus library does a similar thing, but digitally, right? So you're creating an environment where the students are focused on the exact websites that you want them to be engaged in, and everything else is kind of eliminated. And so what's nice about this library being here is that you can build your focus library with a bunch of different types of focus environments. But by building it in this library, you have access to it in any of your classes. So any of those periods, any of those classes, you have access to this library. And this library now is something you can build whenever you have time. And so you can kind of prepare ahead of time for your different libraries. So you would just click here, create focus, give it a name. I can't spell. And then it's a matter of putting in the websites that you want them to have access to, right? So the focus is giving them access to particular websites that you want them to be working in or focused in.
Yeah, but that doesn't necessarily block out any other sites, right?
It should. It should. And it also kind of depends on the device the student has, right? And so if I open up one of these focuses I've built here, I have they have access to it's called a testing focus. So they have access to the Eduphoria testing login and then my Schoology course. And so it should be limiting their access to just those two websites. And if they're on a Chromebook, it should work pretty well. The times that there could be issues is if the student's on a MacBook, because on a MacBook, it'll still, you see here, I have it clicked to open this tab. So when I turn this focus on in that particular class, it's going to open those two tabs to those links for every student. On a Chromebook, it'll at the same time close all the other tabs they did have open. And so all they'll see are the two tabs I want them to focus on. However, on a MacBook, it'll open the two tabs, but all the other tabs that they had open stay open. And in the experiences that we've seen, whatever was already loaded on those tabs are still there. So if they had a YouTube video on and like a half that song loaded, they could still play that half of the song or whatever was there, they would still have access to. It's just once you start the focus, then everything else is blocked after that. So if they hit refresh or something like that, it should be blocked. So I don't know if are you experiencing something different than that
Well,
right now?
I'm just getting started with it.
Okay.
So I was going to ask how to block certain like gaming sites, but this would take care of that.
It would, but there's actually another option for you when it comes to blocking things because you can create classroom rules that will like default block websites for your class when it's turned on. And so you kind of have like these two different options where you have a classroom rule that applies the moment you turn your class on and it runs until your class is ended. And that's just automatic, right? It's like your classroom rules. This focus is different because it's like a special environment that you want to create for the students throughout the class. And maybe there's different environments you want them to have. And so, you can have your rules, but then when you're focused, it's like limiting them to exactly what you want them to be doing. Whereas the rules are just default blocking every time you have your class running. And I'll show you how to do that as well. And so, like, if you want to block gaming websites, what you might want to do is add that to your rules because no matter what focus you're running, those websites will always be blocked.
But I've seen some that say Google sites. unblocked games. So maybe later you can cover specifically how to block individual sites.
Yeah, yeah. And if you want, we can jump right to that since that's a question you have. Would you prefer that?
I'm okay with that.
Okay. All right. So just to wrap up, right, this is your main classes. You have your academy up here to help. You can always create your own class and combine some. Your focus library, you're going to want to spend some time playing around with that. And if you want more information, you can always get with your instructional technology specialist because they can really help you fine tune that for the different types of classes that you're teaching. We talked about adding students, renaming, and then also being able to set schedules and change some classroom settings there, adding co-teachers. But what I'm going to do now is go ahead and go into a class and start that. All right. So when you go into your class, I just clicked a class. It should already, if you guys click in, you should see the same. It should populate all the students that are associated with that particular class in that period. You're not going to see anything right now because we haven't started. You'll notice here, there's a button to start class. So unless you're scheduling to have it start automatically and end automatically, then you're going to have to click this start button every time you want it to start. So it really kind of depends on how you want to run your class, right? But before we even do that, let's get to what we were just talking about, which is the classroom rules. So if we go back to my class, you see there's your focus library. And remember, when you build this library, you have access to it everywhere in Classwize, right? Now, the rules are different. Each class, each period is going to have its own rules. And so you can create different rules for different periods, but you will have to create them. If you teach secondary and you teach 6, 7 periods, you're going to have to go into each one and create the rules for each one, right? So in this one, you can see here, I have 0 rules. I haven't created any for this particular period, so I would have to come in and do that. For this one, I have 1 rule, right? And in this one, I have 3 rules. So you have to go in and create those. But remember that when you create these rules, those rules are in place from the time you hit start till the time it ends. And so they're kind of like the default classroom rules, just like you would for your physical classroom. You know, these are the rules that you must follow when you're in my class. And so you can see here, you would just click to create a rule. They do have some like default searches that you can use with domains that kind of block general things, but you could also just take a website and copy it, right? Command C, Control C, and then go back to Classwize and paste it in and block that particular website. You can choose to block it for the whole class, or if you uncheck that box, you'd have the ability to block. That rule would apply to just these students or groups of students.
So if I see a student on a game, I can't actually copy that link.
Well, that's a great question.
Yeah.
And the answer is it depends. And so let me illustrate that for you. I'm going to go back to my classes. I think it's this one. Yes. I'm going to go ahead and start this class. I'm going to leave this running until 5 o'clock. Right. So every time you hit start, you have to choose an end time. Right. And then once you hit start there, it's going to run automatically until this time that I've chosen. I can always click the pencil to change that end time, or I could just hit end session. But you're going to have to do that every time you turn it on. Every time you hit start, you have to choose an end time and then hit the end session or change it, unless you do the scheduling, right? But let's talk about the rules here. So what you're asking is if I have a student and I see them doing something I don't want them to do, and I want to block that, right? So for example, let me go into this student here. So I can open up their view. Now, this only applies on Chromebooks. So if you have your students on MacBooks, this feature's not going to work the way that I'm sharing with you today. I hopefully we get more students on Chromebooks because it'll be a little bit easier for you to manage through your Classwize. But you'll see here, like this, I can see that the student is on this ChatGPT page or whatever gaming website they might be on. And you'll notice down here, there's a button to create a rule. And so when I click on that, it's going to automatically take the website that that student's on the Chromebook, and then help me create a rule to either block or allow it. And it's going to default to creating that rule for that student. However, I can check mark this box and now I can block it for the whole class. So students are going to be good to try to find websites that aren't blocked. And so if you happen across a student that's found this loophole, if they're on a Chromebook, then you can click that create rule. It should automatically capture the website the student's on, leave it to block, just click whole class and add that rule, and then it's going to block it for the whole class. Now, the other thing to remember about rules, whether you do it from this view or from the whole class view, sometimes there are things you can't block or unblock. You see this little warning here that sometimes the IT administrator has created other rules. So if what you're doing is interfering with that, it might not let you, or it might not work the way you want. And so if that becomes a problem, then you'd have to create like a Zendesk ticket and try to have it addressed through IT. But for the most part, this feature should work. And if your student's on Chromebooks, you'll be able to do exactly what you're asking, where you see the student, right? I see the student on the website. I don't want them on. And then I can even click on the website they're not on if I wanted to, right? Let's say they're acting like they're working on a Chromebook and I see, oh, look, they're on these games, right? Free online board games. So I could click on that tab, then select create a rule, and it's going to add that website. I can have it for that one student, but you probably want to do it for the whole class and then click add that rule. And from there, now it's a part of your classroom rules. So it would apply to every student in that class. Now, if you want to apply that to your other classes, then you would have to come back here, copy that website and paste it as a rule into all the others. But at least you don't have to go looking for it. Now, if they're all on MacBooks, then you would have to make note yourself of the website link and then open that on your own device on a tab and then use that to create the rule. Also know that when you are creating your rules, sometimes, if there's maybe if I just search games, it might do a good job of blocking some games at websites that are already listed as a part of these categories. And it might not catch all of them, but if that's an issue, it'll at least get rid of the easy ones for them to find. And then the other ones you'd have to, be cognizant of the website they're actually on to be able to block them. And so all of that is done from the add rules right here. Did that answer your question?
Well, in my case, they're in PC desktops.
Okay.
In a computer lab.
I'm not sure what that would look like, to be honest. I don't know that is a feature that they just enabled for this school year for Classwize to work in desktop labs. I want to say that because it's a Windows device, it would work very similar to what we just saw with the Chromebook. And so you would be able to create the rule directly from what you're seeing. But that is not something we have had the opportunity to test for this school year.
What's going to be important there, Herman, is that they're not logged into a generic account, that they're actually logging in with their credentials to that PC desktop. Now, whether that's been activated on the PC desktops, I know that that's something they're working on. And so hopefully they'll finish that sooner or as soon as possible so that teachers have access to those desktops as well. But logging in with their credentials versus a generic, whatever that may be in the lab, if there's a generic, having that transition over to them logging in with their credentials so you can actually monitor.
And so in theory, it should work. But, they're still kind of running that process on a lot of the computer labs. Hopefully the campus you're at, it's working and this is something you can start experimenting with to see how it works. But it is new. And so if there are issues, you can let your instructional tech specialist know, create a Zendesk ticket, because all of that process will kind of help us, get through issues that are cropping up because it's something that we're doing for the first time on those labs. So hopefully it works like the Chromebooks. Did you have any other questions?
Not at this time, no. Thank you.
No. Oh, of course. All right. So I'm going to kind of dive down now. We talked about the rules, which is really important. And we talked a little bit about that focus and how they're different. But I did want to show you how with these students, there's particular things you can do using Classwize. You see these three options right here. There's a little megaphone, and then a little website symbol, and then a pause symbol. So the megaphone will allow you to send a message to that student, right? So I can type in a message, and when I hit send, it's going to show up automatically on that student's screen, right? So if I open it up, there's a bit of a delay, but the screen shows up with the time, what I sent, and it's going to stay there until the student clicks the little X to make it go away. So it stays visible to that student until they acknowledge it in some way, right? Now, that communication's not like saved and the student can't communicate back through messaging. So it's just one way to for you to kind of send messages to them to keep them on task or, remind them of things that they need to be doing while they're working on their laptops. And so that's what the megaphone does. The little web symbol allows you to open a website on the student's device, right? So if I wanted to open up a particular website for a student, all I would need to do is copy it and then paste it and hit open site. And then you'll notice on the student device, it's going to open up a brand new tab with that website. And that will happen no matter what device the student is working on. And so it'll automatically open that for them in a new tab so that they have access to that website. That can be really helpful if whatever you've put in your Schoology is not working for some reason. That's one way to kind of get stuff to your students directly pretty quickly. And then the pause actually pauses the internet for that student, right? So if I hit pause for this student, it's going to let me know here that that particular student has their internet paused. I also have a pause feature show up in my menu here. When I open up the student's view here, you'll see that it's paused and all of their other tabs have disappeared, right? And so if that student, they can't open a new tab, they can't click into this one to go anywhere else on a Chromebook, right? So it's kind of locking the device for them and they're not able to do anything online. Okay, so anything web-based, once you pause it, they're not able to do anything online. On the MacBook, like we discussed earlier, if they already had tabs open, those tabs remain open. They're just not able to load anything new. So I'm going to assume on those desktops, it would be pretty similar to the Chromebooks where their other tabs should be limited. All right, when you want to unpause that, you would just hit the pause there, hit it there. The tabs that student did have open will come back up so that they don't lose what they might have had open before. They'll have access to all of those things again. And so they can pick up where they left off. So it's kind of like a temporary pause. You'll also see there's a little pin. So there's also a pin on your classes where you can pin classes to the top. Well, you can also do the same for students. So if you have a class of 30 students and there's, I see my class ended right at 5. And there's 2 or 3 that you need to monitor. You could always pin that student and it's going to pull them to the top. So you don't have to keep scrolling through your list of 30 students to find them alphabetically. You can pin the ones you need to actively monitor this way to here. But also know that, what the district wants teachers to be doing is actively monitoring in the classroom and, being in the power zone and moving around and watching kids as they're working. And, by no means do we want you to be sitting at your desk and being a security guard, watching all of these devices in real time, right? And so just know that once you hit that start, that Classwize is already monitoring what your students are doing online, whether you're sitting at your desk looking at it or not. It's going to be working on that. So you have those options there. announcements, open site, pause internet, pen. Those same three options you also have access to under this class tools dropdown. And so here I can now open a site, but instead of to just that one student, I'm going to send it to the whole class. Works the same way. You copy the link that you want to open, paste it in here, hit open site, and it'll auto-populate to every student. You can also send an announcement. So instead of just the communication to just the one student, now you can send that same announcement or a different one to your whole class. 5 minutes left, whatever you want to be sending to them. So instead of interrupting the flow of the classroom to get all the attention on you, you can just quietly send an announcement to the whole class to remind them of what's happening and what you need them to do. And then there's also the pause internet. And so here, under this class tools dropdown, now I can do it for all students or just some students with a click of the pause down here. And so if there are students that get off task, they've had their warnings. And so if they still can't comply with what the expectation is, then you can pause their internet and they lose access to do their work. So that's all under this class tool. So you can use those things individually. You have access to here for each student, or you can use them whole class. You'll also see under class tools here, that's where you're going to get that focus that we talked about earlier. So you build your focus library from your My Classes homepage. But when you actually want to enable it, you do it from the class tools dropdown. And so when I click it there, you'll see it brings up my library, and that's where I can choose my library that I already created. And then I can choose to lock it so that it's limiting them to these specific sites. If I leave this check marked, then it's going to open the tab for them automatically. Now, when I turn this on, I'm going to do it for all my students. It should, because they're on Chromebooks, it should close all of the tabs except for the two that I want them to have access to, right? So if I look at my students here, I can see that the only sites they have access to are the Eduphoria sign-in site and then my Schoology course. Now, be aware that if you're going to put on a focus, you need to make sure you include everything you need them to have access to. You can see here, there's a link in the Schoology course that is blocked because it's not listed as a part of the focus, right? So you need to be aware of that when you do use the focus. But in this case, I don't want them to have access to that. I just want them to have access to the assignments and things like that, and then the Eduphoria login as well. Okay, so I'm limiting them to those two things. When I end that focus, right, or turn it off, those two tabs will stay open, but all the other tabs I had open previously will come back. And this is on a Chromebook, right? And so all those will come back and they'll have access to all the stuff that they had previously. Okay, and that's the focus. So focus is a really great tool because it's something you can, like you want to definitely set your class rules because those are like non-negotiable. These websites are going to be blocked in my digital classroom all the time. But then there are some times where you want to kind of eliminate distraction because kids will find things to do online and maybe they're just playing in Canva, right? And so you don't want to block that in your rules. But if you do want them to focus on something specific, content specific, and eliminate those kind of distractors, then you can turn on your focus. It'll eliminate those things like Adobe and Canva and make them focus on the things you want them to be working on for their class. And then you can turn it off when they've completed what they need to do. And from this class tools dropdown, there's also a reward feature. And so like you can have a protocol in your class where if the students complete everything they need to do by a certain time, well, then maybe you unblock the gaming website for 10 minutes, right? Or you give them access to some gaming. And so you can set up that reward so that if, every once in a while, if they stay on task, complete what they need to do, you can reward them with access to things that they might not normally have. And then you get to set that time frame for when they have access to it. And so all of those are under the class tools. You can also modify your students. I wouldn't recommend doing a screen share. And just remember, you probably don't want to be sitting at your desk staring at the Classwize screen the whole time that you're in class anyway. So it's better to just let it monitor, Classwize monitor on its own and do that work for you. A couple of more things to show you here just from the student view. We already talked a little bit about how on a Chromebook, right? If I see a student playing a game or on a site that I don't want them to have access to, I can create a rule directly from that site, right? There's a couple of other things you can do here. You can also take a screenshot. And so that allows you to like document in the moment what the student's doing. And so you have that visual documentation that the student was doing this at this time on this day in my classroom, and that's why they're not being successful, or that's why I had to pause the internet, whatever it is you needed to do to handle that. The screenshot here will allow you to document that, and that'll work on any device, right? The create rule right now is only working on Chromebooks and maybe some Windows. It won't work on MacBooks, but the screenshot, you'll be able to do that on any device. The other thing here too, just to remind you, if they're on a Chromebook, even if they're not on the tab, like right now it's following active tab. And so whatever the student switches to, then it's going to switch to that for the teacher view. However, I can, on my own, click into other tabs. And so it doesn't change the student's view. The student's still on their tab, right? It tells you right here, active. On a Chromebook, I can go in and click on any of these. And if I wanted to close them, I can close that. So I can just click on that. It's going to close the tab. A little banner goes across the student's device saying a tab was closed by your teacher, right? So you can see that, letting them know that the teacher closed a tab. And so those are some extra features that you have on Chromebooks where you have that ability to kind of interact directly with what the student's doing online. So remember, we don't expect you guys to be monitoring by watching the screen all the time. And so what's nice about Classwize, as soon as you hit start, Classwize on its own is already documenting what the students are doing in your class online, right? So it's taking screenshots randomly, regularly throughout the whole time you're running the class. And it's also keeping track chronologically of every website that your students try to go to. And you have access to both that type of documentation through your reports. Under reports, there's two kinds. There's screenshot history and student journey. So the screenshot history is like your visual documentation of what the student did throughout the class on whatever day you want to run it. Okay. And then the student journey is like a detailed report of every place that the student tried to visit online, including places that are blocked, right? It'll let you know the student tried to visit this website, but it's blocked. So you wouldn't see that on the screenshot history, right? You can only see what they're doing, where they're at. But the student journey, although it lacks that visual of what they were doing, it's a more accurate description of what they were doing during your class. And so if we run a screenshot history, you can select it for your student and you can choose a time frame to run it, and it goes back at least a couple of weeks. So if you needed to generate a report for documentation and you needed to go back a couple of weeks, you do have the ability to do that. I'm just going to run it for today for that one student. And then it's going to run this report of these are all of the website, like the random screenshot images that Classwize has taken for this particular student for today, with how much time they were there. Now, mine's not going to be as effective as a normal student because I'm not really using the student device. It's just kind of on to help me demonstrate. But I can click on view and it'll show me what the student was doing, what their screen looked like, right? And so I can kind of click through here and see, if they were typing something, it would show me what they typed and the words that they were doing during the time that they were on this website for this time frame. And then I can download those screenshots, and they'll be time stamped, right? And so for all of these, right, there's 7 minutes on ChatGPT. What were they doing for 7 minutes? And so I can open that up And I have this running report of what they were doing throughout that time. Now, for me, nothing was happening, but for a normal student, you would be able to see if they were using ChatGPT, what they typed in, and then what the AI generated for them. And so you would have documentation for that and be able to download those screenshots. And this, I mean, this report can be run for any kind of device. Now, I know sometimes for MacBooks, there's a little bit of an issue because permissions need to be enabled on those devices for you to be able to see the screen. A lot of times on a MacBook, all you're going to see is the desktop, and you won't be able to see any internet activity because the permissions haven't been enabled on that device. However, maybe you can't see what the student's doing, but you could still run their student journey because that's not visual based. It's a running record of every website the student went to during that particular period on that day. And so even on a MacBook, you'll be able to run this report because it's just monitoring the internet journey that they went on for that particular day. So you pick your student, you pick the day that you want it to run for, right? If I just run it for today, and then you hit export. And what it's going to do is send a PDF to your Outlook, right? Because you've come through your Plaza class link. And so it's all associated with that. And so it'll send an email to your Outlook with a PDF attached to it. You can open up that PDF and it'll just be a chronological list of every website that the student went to, including websites that are blocked by your rules or blocked by the district filtering. And you'll be able to see that they tried to access that website. And so, there's different types of reports. The screenshot one will always work for Windows devices. And it might work for MacBooks with the proper permissions enabled, but the student journey is a much more detailed, accurate itinerary, if you will, of everything that they did, and that'll work for no matter what device. And so you always have access to those two types of reports, and you can even run those reports without having your class running. So like if at the end of the day you want to run a report, you don't have to start the class. You should be able to just run that report, and it saves it for at least 2 weeks. So you can always go back in time a couple of weeks to generate those reports if that's something you need for documentation. Any questions about the reports?
Going back to the focus library,
Mhm.
Can you set it up for individual students?
You can.
Okay. All right.
Good question. So if I go to my focus library and I go to open that, this out of the way here. So you see down here at the bottom, I have this option to select students. And so you can leave it for the whole class, but if I uncheck that, then I can turn that on for specific students. So it's another great feature of that focus because, I mean, really what it's allowing us to do is create a digital version of what you're doing all the time in your normal classroom where some students need more focus than others. And so you're able to create those environments for them to really help them be successful. Good question. And, that was perfect timing because normally Classwize, it stops working at 4:10. So on a normal day, you would lose access to Classwize at 4:10, and you won't gain access to be able to use it until the following morning, probably like 7:30 in the morning. And that is just because, students aren't, the parents monitor the students after school hours, not the teacher. And so I'm not going to be able to demonstrate Classwize for you anymore because if I hit start, it's going to say that, we're past that time. And so today, our time ended at 5:15. And so you asked that question right in time for me to show you that you can individualize that focus for particular students or the whole class or group of students.
All right. Thank you.
Of course.
All right. Before we end the show here, thank you for being with us, ending the webinar. Just I sent the link out to you guys so that for the survey, so you guys can complete that for your attendance. Also, we have a link to our catalog of courses. I'm going to share my screen here really quick, Mr. Herman. And the catalog courses that we have for our department, not only does it have the link to the I.T.S webinar, so you can see we'll update this every month to show you all the sessions that are be happening. We're only having 2 sessions this month for our start because it's a pretty busy month for us. But hopefully we'll have at least 3 to hopefully 4 sessions a month where we can cover some of the topics that and devices and things like websites that you guys use in your classroom. So definitely look for that. And inside the catalog, you also have a link to Classwize. So there's an actual course, a full course for Classwize. If you click in there and you register an EPISD, Herman covered a lot. You may need to refresher. You can always click and register for that course, and that course is live throughout the entire year. So you can get all the information that you may have missed or forgotten about Classwize. So again, we have not only that, we have a ton of other courses, but the calendar for webinars will be updated here monthly. Everything will be through University, and the links to the Zoom meetings will be inside of University.